organization in the Kenny Lake area called the Wrangell Institute for Science and Environment, or WISE, involved as well. And so just some of the people that you'll see here today, we've got Robin Mayo and Moses Korth from WISE. They're going to be in McCarthy, and so they're going to teach us a little bit about the area there. There's me, Amanda Frenshu, and Kenny Steck from the Bureau of Land Management. We're going to be on today. And then there's a lot of people that went into working so hard to put up these videos from the National Park Service who helped manage this landmark. And so we're going to hear from Edward Graybear, Diane Millard, Jamie Hart, Katie Moser, Jack Townsend, and Russ Scribner, all from the Wrangell-St. Elias National Park Service. And so thank you for everyone who worked so hard to put this together today. And so I'm going to get started here. Just in case, I wanted to make sure that everyone knew where Alaska was, because I'm glad I chose to do that, just to make sure that people who aren't familiar with the area kind of know where we are and what this place we're talking about is. And so Alaska is the northernmost state in the United States, and we're right at the Arctic Circle line. And so if you can see right here, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but this south central area is where the Copper River Basin is and the Copper River watershed. And so you can see it zoomed in a little bit over here, but this is where we have a lot of communities and a lot of Alaska Native villages in the area. And so some of the more notable ones are listed there, such as Glen Allen, Copper Center, and Kenny Lake. And we're actually zooming in more into the area of Chitina and McCarthy and Kennecott. And it's kind of a different way of living up here because it is on the road system, but it is a very interesting road, and I'll talk about that here in a moment. But this kind of gives you an idea of what it looks like to travel out here. If you were coming from Glen Allen, it is a 4-hour drive to get from Anchorage, which is the biggest city in Alaska, all the way to Glen Allen. And then from Glen Allen, you would travel down a road called the Richardson Highway, and it would bring you past Copper Center to an intersection right here that brings you out onto the Edgerton Highway, which goes through the Kenny Lake area and down towards Chitina. And Chitina is a very small little town that is an Alaska Native village. And so there's a lot of people that live there. And it used to be a stop on this amazing railroad that went through the area. And so you can see here that this is where the McCarthy Road starts. And it starts to go back into Kennecott and McCarthy, the area we'll be talking about today. And it is a 60-mile road, mostly dirt, very, very washboardy, which is what we call really, really small bumps that you get after a lot of rain. And it's got a lot of potholes, which are made when there's a lot of tires that go through. And so a lot of people find this area to be very special, and they live there year round. But there's also a lot of people that come in to work seasonally. But this road goes all the way back here to Kennecott and McCarthy. And it actually used to be where a train would go through, bringing copper ore from the old mining town of Kennecott down the McCarthy Road all the way down here and to Cordova, where it would get on boats. And so this is just a super unique area, and I'm excited you guys get to learn about it today. But for now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pass it off. This is a Kennecott mill here. So I just wanna give you an idea of this area and what we're going to be talking about. And so this is kind of a zoomed in version of what used to be the Kennecott mill town. And you can see the big mill building here and all the different processing buildings that they had. And there's bunkhouses. There used to be a state-of-the-art hospital here. And so I'm excited you guys get to learn about that. But I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Robin Mayo from WISE, who is in McCarthy right now. Robin, are you ready to tell us where you are?
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here. You're still screen sharing. There we go. All right, welcome everyone. My name is Robin and I work for the Wrangell Institute for Science and Environment. We are a nonprofit that does science and environmental education in the entire Copper River Valley. And I want to do an acknowledgement right now on behalf of all of the presenters and the National Park Service that the land that we're going to talk about today and the location is the past, present, and future home of the Ahtna people. And although most of what we're going to talk about is more recent history, we want to acknowledge that the Ahtna people have lived on this land for thousands of years, and that Wrangell-St. Elias National Park was also the homeland of the Kennecott and the Eyak people. So I'm going to switch to the other view on my phone and show you where I am. All right. So I am on the edge of McCarthy here, and the building that you can see right here is the museum, but it was once the train depot. When people were first arriving on the train to this area, this is the first building that you would see, and it's now a fantastic museum with lots and lots of relics of the area. And then I'm gonna zoom over and take a little walk down this trail. I really believe that when you're thinking about history, it's easy to get focused on places and dates and names, and sometimes it's hard to really internalize, you know, the everyday lives and the fact that this history really happened in the place you stand. And that's especially apparent in McCarthy, because as you can see, this has very much gone back to woods, many parts of this area. But here down this little trail in the middle of the woods, we have the old railroad turntable. So the railroad came up from Cordova. They would bring these long ore trains all the way up from Cordova, also passengers and freight. And this is a very, very mountainous area. The valley isn't very wide. And they had a problem when they got to McCarthy. There was no way to turn that train engine around. It takes a really, really large area to make a loop track to turn around a train. And so they would pull up, unhook the locomotive, put the locomotive on this turntable and turn it around, rehook the train, and then they would back the remaining 5 miles up to Kennecott and load up with copper ore. And then they were pointing in the right direction, ready to head down to Cordova again. And this is the place where I really first got the feeling in my gut that this really happened. I had seen pictures, I had read accounts, I'd been to Kennecott, I'd seen it, and I'd said wow a lot, but I hadn't really felt in my gut that this wilderness used to be a really bustling industrial center of Alaska, but it was at the turnstile that I got that feeling. And so I hope that you can, as you appreciate this amazing place, that you can start to internalize that gut feeling that history is all about people building things, and our role as students of history is to really understand what their lives were like. So I'll be chiming in later, but that's my bit for now.
Thank you so much, Robin, for giving us a little bit of perspective there. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to switch over to play a video for you guys of Ranger Diane, who is from the National Park Service, and she had a little bit to tell you about Kennecott and the town. But just so you know, there's a little bit of interference. It was raining at the time of the filming, and there was a very excited dog nearby. So just hang in there tight, and I hope that the sound gets across for you guys. But I'm going to share my screen here so you can see it. Okay, I'm gonna get the video started.
When you look around Kennecott now, it's pretty peaceful. You can hear the creek. It wasn't always like this. When Kennecott was here, this was a noisy, loud, busy place. We have the depot here. There would be a train coming in every other day. The mill was running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day except for Christmas and 4th of July. All those machines banging and clanking. It was so loud you could hear it all the way down to McCarthy. And what they were mining here was copper, but it was very special copper. The copper here was some of the richest copper ever found in the world, even to this day. Most of what they were mining at that time, even today, is less than 2% copper. And the high-grade ore here in Kennecott was 70% copper. So it was fabulously rich. But the richness of the ore is not the only reason why Kennecott was such a big deal. Their timing was perfect. When they first found the copper was right when the country was becoming industrialized with electricity. New inventions had just come out, things like the automobile, having electric light bulbs in your home, the telephone. These things machines were all being invented right when the copper was discovered here, and they all needed copper to work. It was the miracle metal of the time. And when Kennecott discovered their biggest load of copper up on Jumbo Mountain, then that was right when World War I broke out. And you need copper for munitions. You need copper for ships. The United States did not join the war immediately. And so the United States was selling copper to both sides, both the Allies and the Germans. And the price of copper went through the roof. Kennecott made a heck of a lot of money. Now, to get all this copper out of here, Kennecott had quite a challenge because they were 200 very burly miles from the coast. And so what they had to do was build a railroad. They called it the Copper River Northwestern Railroad. Everybody else called it the Can't Run and Never Will, because they had no faith that this railroad would ever make it here. But as you can see, it did. And so the first train came in with the copper, for the copper, and went out with $250,000 worth of copper immediately. And from then on, twice a week, trainloads of copper would be hauled out of here. And the mill building right here behind us is where most of the processing of the copper took place. And most of it was gravity concentration. Copper is heavier than the limestone around it, so if you grind it up small and you run it through a bunch of machines known as jigs and shaker tables, they were kind of like gold pan. And the heavier metal would go one way, and the lighter limestone, the waste rock, would go another way. And this is the way they could separate out the good ore from the bad ore. However, there was a little bit of a problem. Is not all the ore was good ore. Some of the ore was not quite so good. This is good ore, the chalcocite, 70% copper. This is the malachite and azurite. Don't know if you can see that. It's a prettier rock. It's got a lot of blue and green in it, but it didn't weigh as much. It was only about 4% copper, which is still much better than what most places were mining at the time. However, you cannot separate it from the waste rock using gravity separation. And so Kennecott had a new process invented just for them called ammonia leaching. Other mines that had problems with separating their ore would use sulfuric acid to separate the ore, but the base rock here was limestone. And the limestone would dissolve in the sulfuric acid also. And so they invented a new process using ammonia. Ammonia would not dissolve the limestone, it would only dissolve the copper. And with that process, they were able to remove about 98% of the copper from the ore. They're actually about 5 miles away, way up near the top of the mountain. The ore came down in tram cars and came in buckets to the top of the building. Now, if you were a miner, you would live up at the top. And you might not come down for 6 months or more. They had bunkhouses up there, and their bunkhouses had some good amenities too. They had a pool table, they had a commissary in the jumbo mine. Now, I'm sure after hauling rocks for 8 or 10 hours, the first thing I'd want to do is go work out in the gym. Now, to run this big mining operation, this whole town, you're going to need some power. And so where we're standing now is right at the powerhouse. When Kennecott first started, they had a boiler in the sawmill that could burn green frozen trees. It could burn anything. But once the railroad got here, they decided to build a proper powerhouse. They brought in boilers, one boiler a year for 4 years, and they brought in steam turbines to make electricity with. Right across from us here, you can see a steam turbine. Now, that worked pretty good, but they needed additional power, and so another way to make power was they had a Pelton water wheel. And the Pelton water wheel is in the corner. We can't quite see it from here, but they could use water from Bonanza Creek to run the Pelton water wheel in the summer. In the winter, they did not have enough water because the mill took 1,000 gallons of water a minute. And so all the water from National Creek went to the mill. And the water from Bonanza Creek was also diverted to the dam they had on National Creek in the wintertime to run the mill. Now, Kennecott also made steam, more steam than they needed to run their turbines with, and so all the houses were heated with steam. Not only the houses, the sidewalks had the steam lines running underneath them, and so they had steam-heated sidewalks, didn't have to shovel as much snow in the wintertime. Now, as time goes on, processes change, new things are invented, diesel generators were invented, so Kennecott brought in a couple of big diesel generators. This is not the original powerhouse, though. The original powerhouse burnt down in 1924. It was August, which here in Alaska means it's starting to get cold. Not only did they not have power, they didn't have heat. They had to work really fast to get a new powerhouse up. They were very fortunate in that they had purchased a mine on the other side of the mountain, the Motherlode mine, that had its own powerhouse. And that's where the steam turbine that's left with us comes from, is the Motherlode powerhouse. And they got the new powerhouse running, and it cost them a little over $1 million to build a new powerhouse.
Hi, I want to talk to you today about this iconic building here in Kennecott. This is the Concentration Mill Building, and as you look all the way up to the top, this is a 14-story wooden structure. It's a very tall building that supports and concentrates the copper as it comes down the hillside. This hill slope was used to the advantage to be able to use the gravity to move the slurry of rock and copper ore from the top of the building throughout the whole operation. The idea was to separate the waste rock from that copper ore and eventually stack it at this location, put it on the rail cars, and then send this down to Cordova on the Copper River and Northwestern Railway. From there, it would go down on the steamship to the smelter in Tacoma. So again, this huge structure built on a hillside, it's hard to imagine how it's still standing. One of the things they did was to terrace the structure, and it was piecemeal together in different puzzle pieces over time. And a lot of those pieces are definitely seeing a little bit of a testament to time and have worn out. And so what we've done over a few years now has been to work with engineers and contractors, and also our local staff, as well as other architects and folks, to try to figure out how to stabilize the structure. So one of the pieces that we did is to use these large sort of drill bit type of pieces to stabilize the foundations. I talked about those terracing, and those are almost like Lincoln logs layered up on the hillside. So each of those throughout the structure will have these anchors to support and to stabilize the structure. So we see the older piece right here next to the newer piece. You can tell the difference between those two. So this large piece here is a long, cylindrical, almost like a drill bit. So it can drill all the way down to try to get into the bedrock. And then it stayed in place. It had the ability to insert the cement into that piece and that formed that cement barrier on the slope of this building. And that's just one piece of the different phases that we have going. We currently have phase 3, which is working on some of the upper parts of the mill building today. So we hope that you come and visit us and you're able to come and see the different pieces of stabilization that we've had here in the mill building.
Okay, I hope the sound worked for everyone. If you have any questions, you can start putting them in the chat, but it's just such an amazing place, and we're so glad we get to share it with you. And here in a minute, I'm gonna start the next video, which takes you to a little bit of a different viewpoint, and Ranger Katie will be teaching us a little bit more about Kennecott town life. But if you just hold on a second, I'm gonna start that video. You can't see her, but you can see the amazing picture from the video that will kind of swing around and show you what she's talking about here. But it'll just take me a minute to open the video if you would be patient with me. Okay, I'm going to start screen sharing again.
Thanks, Amanda. You're doing a great job as a host.
Thank you, Kenny. I appreciate it. All right, here we go.
Welcome to the Kennecott Dairy Barn, sometimes referred to as the stable. Normally around 5 to 6 cows were housed here in the barn, and this is also where they were milked. However, the milk was pasteurized elsewhere. I have a quote by Mary Ellen Dugan Clark, a child that lived here in Kennecott, that explains the process. In the same building with the library was the dairy. The barn man would bring the milk up from the barn in a 2-wheeled cart that he pushed. The milk was pasteurized and then bottled and taken to the store. The bottles had a narrow neck so that we could pour off the top milk for light cream. Heavy cream was not available. When we went to the States, me and my sister, when we first had whipped cream, we didn't know what it was and didn't like it. There are other accounts that state both cream and butter were at times available from the Kennecott dairy. It probably varied from year to year what was available. There are also many fond memories from children who lived here about the homemade ice cream from the dairy's milk made with the ice from the glacier. The general layout of the barn was a hayloft upstairs with multiple chutes down to the first floor for hay and different types of feed for the animals. The first floor housed the animals and had stalls lining each side. The barn even came complete with barn cats to keep down the small rodent populations. Multiple children who lived here have fond memories of feeding the cats fresh milk on trips to the dairy barn. Kennecott dairy cows were not in the stable all the time. They were, at least at some points, allowed to roam free and would be herded up at milking time. When the mill shut down for 2 years, they got rid of the cows and many were sold to people in McCarthy. Eventually, there was a problem with tuberculosis infecting the cows, and Kennecott stopped keeping milk cows altogether. After that, powdered milk and evaporated milk were the only available options in Kennecott. But the dairy barn held more than just cows. It also housed horses. So when the Kennecott dairy shut down, this building would have still been used. Today, the building is owned by the Park Service and currently serves as a carpentry shop as we continue to work on preserving Kennecott's history. Here we have not only a beautiful view, but also a lot of history. Behind me is the 2-room Kennecott schoolhouse where the children who lived here would have come to learn. But it wasn't all work and no play here in Kennecott. They also had a lot of fun too. And here I actually have some examples for you. Here we have children ice skating and sledding. Here they are playing hockey. These are the tennis courts that many people would have had fun with. Here we have 2 women dressed to the nines getting ready to go ski. Here's the handball court that actually is located right behind me. The remains of it anyway. Over here, we had the baseball field. That's what they used in the summer, but in the winter, it became the ice skating rink. And I'd like to point something out to you in this picture. In this picture, this is how tall the glacier used to be. Well, let's look where the glacier is at now. Break. At the time that historic photo was taken, the glacier would have been over 330 feet taller than it is today. That's over 30 stories. I am going to leave you all with a quote from Jean Morris, one of the children who used to live here. I remember hearing one of the Kennecott kids saying at the reunion that the glacier was so high, we didn't even know there was a mountain beyond it.
So that gives you a little bit of a better idea of what it was like to live in Kennecott. And Kennecott was constructed in the early 1900s and ran until about 1938 when the last train left the area. And I just want to give you the impression that it was such an amazing just feat that they did to build this entire functioning mill town right here in what is basically the middle of nowhere. And for those of you who don't know a whole lot about Alaska, especially in this area, it can get very, very warm in the summers and then get very, very cold in the winters with temperatures that can reach down to -40, -50. And so to have that mill being run the entire time from 4 different mines located in the mountains behind us, it was very interesting. But now I'm going to pass it back to Robin Mayo from WISE, who is still in McCarthy, and she's going to give us a bit more context about the historical town that McCarthy is and what role it played in connection with Kennecott. So Robin, are you ready?
I am. Here I am. I am 5 miles down the road from Kennecott in the town of McCarthy, and just up the road from where I was when I showed you the railroad depot and the turntable a few minutes ago. And I'm gonna switch so you can see not me, but what my camera is seeing. Okay, how's that look? So McCarthy is, oh, here comes an awesome vehicle by. Let's look at this classic truck driving by. That's a perfect example. One of the first things I was gonna talk about is how modern McCarthy is really a mix of old and new. You have some very modern businesses doing their thing, you have technology walking around, but you also have some classic old relics from the days of the mining. Here's a wagon. This was the one-car garage, still holding a classic old Ford. This was the one-car garage where a mechanic worked on the cars of McCarthy. Now, you've heard a lot about McCarthy or Kennecott, excuse me, as a very organized industrial mining town, but McCarthy was a very, very different place. McCarthy basically was where the fun happened. Kennecott was where the work happened. McCarthy's where the fun happened. And so this town was known for its bars, and we still have the Golden Saloon here. It was known for its stores for things that you couldn't get in McCarthy. And it was also known for what's called the row, where the certain kind of woman lived who provided things that you couldn't get up in Kennecott. So we're just gonna walk down the main street of McCarthy here. As I was saying, it's a mix of old and new. For example, here's the Ma Johnson Hotel, still in the same false front building that it was housed years and years ago. And a local businessman has revitalized this hotel, and people can come stay here. And then here at the Golden Saloon and the McCarthy Lodge, they are using the quiet summer to do some renovations, but have a big outdoor pavilion set up where people are still dining. And we'll keep walking down the road here. Now, McCarthy was just about abandoned, almost completely abandoned in 1938 when the mine closed, because that was where most of their business came from. But a few people did stay behind. Prospectors, some of the landowners who originally were here kept their cabins up, And then in the 1970s, McCarthy really saw a resurgence and became a tourist destination, which is what it is now. We're walking right now past the grocery store. You can get ice cream here and some necessities, but they're all trucked in a long, long ways and then brought across the bridge and come here. So things tend to be pretty expensive in McCarthy because they've had to travel a long way. Now, the first time I came to McCarthy was in the late 1990s, and you still had to pull yourself across the, the early 1990s, you still had to pull yourself across the river on a cable car tram. And so it was really an adventure getting here. A few years later, they did build a footbridge that foot travel, bicycles, motorcycles, and small all-terrain vehicles can travel on. And there is now a road bridge, but it's privately owned, and so only a few people purchase the keys. Okay, we've made it down here now to another one of McCarthy's landmarks. This is the old hardware store. Let's see, a good perspective is over here. And once again, this is an old false-fronted building that has survived the ravages of time, and it now houses the Wrangell Mountain Center, which is a local nonprofit that provides educational and scientific programs. And they have taken very good care of this old building, so it's still used for their programs today. And then a lot of the original houses have been lovingly taken care of. For example, this is a private residence. It belongs to a local artist and quilter, but this is one of the original houses from the McCarthy days. I'm gonna walk up around the corner. Amanda, am I going slow enough, or is this gonna make people seasick?
I'm enjoying the view, Robin. It looks good.
Okay, so once again, with our theme of old and new, here's some houses that are mostly abandoned, but still intact. Someone's taken good enough care of them that they haven't collapsed. There's some older vehicles lined up. But then, whoa, there's some newer vehicles. This is one of the trucks that one of the local businesses used to bring in their goods. Right behind that truck, a fine modern example, is this classical truck. And wouldn't you love to know the stories behind this truck, which is now gracefully retired as a planter, but you can be sure that it saw some adventures in its day. We're gonna walk on up the road behind the store. Now, if you come to McCarthy expecting a picture perfect and manicured destination town, you may be surprised, because this is also very much a working town. Here's the woodshed behind the Wrangell Mountain Center. Lots of people still live here both year round, and summer residents, and then lots and lots of tourists come here to explore. And I'm gonna walk up to the corner here. The last house I want to show you belonged to, I believe it's the Bennett family, but my notes are in my pocket, so if I get that wrong, Parkies, please correct me. And this is the house that is still owned by one of the original family members from the family that homesteaded the land and started the town of McCarthy back in 1906, I believe. So here's this house. It is still habitable. They've been taking great care of it. And can you imagine how much history is in this house? And then we're gonna take one last look. McCarthy Creek flows along the side of McCarthy. And actually the notorious row where those certain ladies lived was down here and been washed away. But we're gonna walk down to the creek. Alaskan rivers like to change course. They're live and always moving, and so they have washed away the remnants. But where I am now is where the row was located back in the day. McCarthy Creek is flowing fast today. I wouldn't be surprised to see a pack rafter coming by, and it's gonna flow out into the Kennecott River, on into the Chitna and the Xena rivers, into the Copper River, and on down to Cordova. So that is your very quick tour of McCarthy. There's lots and lots to see here. If you're a history buff, you could spend days just poking around in the old rusty bits and pieces that are here. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm gonna sign out now.
Thank you so much, Robin. That was really interesting. And I thought it was really cool to see all those different perspectives right from your point of view. Okay, so this would be a great time for anyone who has questions. If you want to type them in the chat, we have Ranger Jamie here and a couple other people from the Park Service who would be the greatest people to answer that. But I would encourage you, be curious. And so we wanted to provide a way to show you this really unique bit of history that's right in the middle of Alaska that hardly anyone knows about. And it's hard to do in person these days, and so we wanted to provide a way to do it online. And so this is a good opportunity just to ask any questions that you're curious about, so that people can connect through technology to hear what you're wondering.
Thanks, Amanda. I'll just really quick maybe start with the first question that my wife Hannah had. And she was curious, and this might be for a National Park Service staff member who's on, but she was curious how certain individuals are able to like privately own land within the national park, specifically up like the Jumbo Mine Trail. There's several old historical, maybe original type houses that are there that are now privately owned. And she was just curious maybe how that came to be, and if that's still, if you're able to, you know, if those individuals were to sell their land, how would that work? Would it go back to the Park Service, or will that be privately owned for, you know, for the foreseeable future?
That's a great question, Hannah. Is anyone from the Park Service available to answer that one?
Yeah, this is Jamie. If you'd like, I can start my video as well.
Sure.
All right. So to answer your question, we actually have in-holdings that were here prior to this being a national park. And so as folks were living here for many, many years before the national park was here, they purchased those lands privately. And so as we came in, we just purchased property or had federal property around all of those places. So there's some places in the lower 48 where national parks are able to then take back some of that land, but we don't have that up here in Alaska because of the way that this park was formed. And so people are able to keep that property and to, you know, live here as long as they want, pass along that property to their descendants, and that can continue in that same way.
Thank you. And we also had another question that you would probably be really great to answer. So Michelle is wondering if they still offer mill site tours for the mill building.
They do. Right now, the structure itself, the mill building, is actually closed to do the basically the stabilization work that I was talking about in my video. And so for this summer, we have an alternative option to be able to go through some of the buildings with the St. Elias Alpine Guides tours. And so they do a tour through town a couple times a day. So that is still an option, yes.
Great, thank you so much. Continue to type those questions in the chat or grab the mic if you'd like to. We have experts here to answer them.
Amanda, this is Robin again. Can you guys see my video again?
We can.
I just wanted to take a moment, as when I came back to the Wrangell Mountain Center grounds after walking up behind it, I ran across this cool fellow. One of the things that the Wrangell Mountain Center does is offer artist residencies, and people come out and interpret what they see, whether through writing or photography. And this amazing raven is made of driftwood, willow, wire, and a few rocks, and he stands in their yard. So one of the wonderful things about McCarthy is it's just full of bits and pieces of art like this. So just wanted to share that with everyone.
Thank you, Robin. So continue to think of any questions you might have. But while you're thinking, I just wanted to touch briefly on, there's a lot of amazing people that still live in McCarthy. You have folks that live here year round that have homesteaded here, which means that they got the property and they built upon it. There's people who farm out here, people with a lot of interesting stories on how they chose to end up in this amazing place. And then you journey down a little bit down the road to Kennecott, and you have a lot of people who stay here in the summers and they work for the Park Service, or they work for one of the local tour services out here, and they learn all about this amazing area. There's a whole mill town right here. There's old historical trails that go back and are maintained by the Park Service. All over the place here, you can go take hikes on the glacier and just learn all about geology, a lot about history, and specifically Alaskan history. But you can keep thinking of questions. We could go on and on about this amazing place, but we want to give you guys the chance to ask anything you might be curious about.
This is Robin, and I have a question that's probably best addressed by Jamie or another Park Service person. As we were just walking through Kennecott, we were really struck by how some of the buildings are totally crumbling and some of the buildings are being restored, and wondering how you make that decision, which buildings are being restored and which are kind of being let to crumble. And honestly, I like the crumbly ones just as much. So we're glad that you do both.
Yeah, this is Jamie here again. So Robin, that's a really good question. It's actually really hard to answer because I think the way that we would say it is it depends. Some of these structures have already had a fair bit of work done to them to some degree, and then some of them haven't had any work done at all. And so, you know, the ones that have maybe fallen into a little bit farther disrepair, those are likely gonna stay at that level. It's just too hard for us to try to go in, and we don't necessarily rebuild structures that have fallen completely down. We do have some structures, like the hospital is a good example, where it has some aspects that are fixed up and some that are not. And as we've had like flooding through the National Creek area, which is right near there, the foundation had seen some pretty bad damage. And so that part was worked on, and supports have been put inside the building, and the roof has been partially, you know, redone with the, you know, the exterior part of it. But really that's all the work that's going to be done to it. So the whole foundation, the entire rebuilding or repainting of that structure won't happen. So it kind of depends on the building, and you know, some of those buildings, maybe they are a little bit easier to repair, and we can kind of go in and actually do the full foundation, or all the structural pieces that are inside, or even the roof and everything that needs to be done. So it kind of depends a little bit on just how far gone it's gotten, if that makes sense.
Thank you so much for answering that question, Jamie. So yeah, there's a lot of amazing buildings in this town, and a lot of them have been worked on by the Park Service to stabilize them and make them available for the public to go in and learn more about what life was like here, and just the amazing things they were able to do here in the middle of Alaska. So keep thinking of questions. That was a really good one, Robin. Thank you. Okay, keep thinking of questions, but just since we're looking to start to wrap up here, I was just thinking about how it's pretty amazing that these people who came looking for copper and other opportunities through rocks and all these other things, they journeyed back here doing expeditions, and they met up with local Alaskan natives who lived out here, and they learned about these copper deposits. And so they came back here and they built this amazing place that is kind of slowly going back to nature where it kind of came from. But the Park Service is working so hard to stabilize some of these structures, and so that we can continue to learn from it. And there's a lot of scientific research being done with the glacier, and done by the Rainbow Mountain Center out in McCarthy. And just I'm thinking about all these communities that are here in a way because of Kennecott. Some of these places that were stops along the train ride all the way to Cordova, and you can still see driving down the road old rails, and people used to pick up railroad spikes from the railroad. But this was all done just so long ago. It's been over 100 years since it was built, and there's structures like the one I'm sitting in right now, the old Blackburn School, that are still in really good condition and fully functional. And so it's such an amazing piece of history, piece of engineering that people were able to figure out and work so hard to put together. It took a lot of work to put all these bridges up, like the Tuscaloosa Bridge is a huge canyon that they just built this railway over, and we still use that bridge today. And Kenny is posting some links in the chat for some videos that you could go look at to learn more. Kenny Lake School puts together some amazing documentaries quite a few years ago about the railway and about Kennecott, and so you can learn more that way. They're available for sale locally. And with that, I'm just going to do a screen share of the last slide of my PowerPoint here. And you can kind of get an idea of how to contact us with any questions you have. And I would direct you more specifically down to the bottom, Russ Scribner, who works for Wrangell-St. Elias National Park. His email there, if you think of anything later on that you'd like to find out more about, you can email Russ and he can get information out to all the different park rangers that might be more knowledgeable, or he might be able to answer those questions. And so I would encourage you to reach out to him or any of the rest of us, and we could put you in touch with the right people who would be able to answer those questions, because it's such an amazing place. And I hope that, and I would encourage you to someday come out and visit it and just take advantage of this time we have to recreate with our families and go out and learn new things, and just explore this amazing area that we have. And for those locals specifically, I would really encourage you to visit Kennecott if you didn't know much about it before. You know a little bit more now, and maybe you have a place to start learning about this amazing piece of history we have right on our back door. And so it's a long road to get back here, and you have to walk across the footbridge and catch a shuttle and get to McCarthy or go to Kennecott, but it's so incredibly worth it. And I grew up in Kenny Lake. I have been learning about this place my whole life, but I'm still learning now as an adult. And so I would encourage you to explore and learn as much about this amazing place as possible. And so I just want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you for all these different countries, people who are joining us from different places, and people who are locals who wanted to learn more. So thank you all so much. And Kenny, I can't see the chat, but if you notice any other questions coming in, we can take a moment.
Awesome. Yeah, really no other questions, just some people saying thank you for this. And I just want to say just a word on, if you're able to visit the Kennecott McCarthy area, definitely, if you can, you bring a bicycle, because that is such an awesome way to get across the bridge. And you can go check out McCarthy. You can go down 5 miles to the Kennecott Mill area, and you can even go a little bit farther towards the Root Glacier. So kind of a bicycle friendly place to me. I've done that a couple times, been awesome. And yeah, thanks for showing up. Those of you that joined us, we appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Definitely take advantage of that contact information there. I'll give you one more second if you want to take a picture of it, but I'm going to stop screen sharing here and go back to the main page. Okay, so thank you all. I'm going to end the meeting here unless anyone has any more questions, but thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to all the people that made this possible. Thank you to the Bureau of Land Management, Glen Allen Field Office, for all your hard work, Kenny especially. Thank you for joining us, Robin from WISE. We really appreciate the perspective you offered in McCarthy, and thank you especially to the National Park Service who helped manage all this and put this together, especially Russ, who made it possible for us to hear from all these amazing experts. And thank you, Robin, for making that comment. If you want to rewatch any of this, you can go to the WISE website, Wrangell Institute of Science and Environment, which should be wise.edu.org, and you can see the recording and hear about any more possible virtual events in the future. So thank you so much, and we hope that someday you get to experience the amazing place that is McCarthy and Kennecott in person in the future. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to end the video here.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you, Kenny. And he also just made a chat comment that there are videos made by Kenny Lake High School students about Chittenden and the railway. So thank you. All right, goodbye everyone from all over the world. I'm signing off here from McCarthy.